After receiving a soap commission from a very well-known witch, I set out to make my funnest and most ambitious soap project ever. And let me tell you all, the results shocked me. Stick around. Something very strange happened this morning. An owl flew in through my fireplace and dropped something on my table before fleeing, never to be seen again. What did it drop, you may ask? It appears to be a scroll of parchment, or at the very least, a scroll of very aged paper. I'm not sure about you, but I've never personally been delivered anything by owl, so this is a first. The owl seemed very anxious to leave, so I didn't have a chance to see if it had anything else in its talons. The scroll is sealed with wax that has a cute little cat, so maybe that's some clue as to who sent it. Let's open it up and see what's inside. It looks like a letter addressed to me from Hermione Granger. Not gonna lie, it's kinda creepy how she found my address, but she's a smart witch, so she probably found some legal way. I wanna see what she wrote.
Dear Chris, I hope this letter reaches you without too much trouble. Non-magical post has been quite troublesome lately. I was wondering if you could please create a bar of soap for me? I cast a spell on a loofah sponge to soap itself, of course, but lately I've been curious about washing the proper muggle way. I've read a few books on soap making just to dip my toes in the subject, and it can be quite dangerous, especially since muggle treatment for burns is so rudimentary. Please be careful. I've included 2 $20 bills.
Okay, so I didn't see 2 $20 bills. I bet the owl took it.
Oh, Canadian money is absolutely fascinating. I couldn't resist the urge to exchange one of each type of bill just to see all the colors they use. I hope this payment is adequate for 4 bars of soap, but please let me know if it's not enough. I'd hate for you to feel shortchanged, and I'd make sure to send the proper amount straight away. Wishing you the best, Hermione Granger. P.S. Oh, I plan to give the bar to Mr. Arthur Weasley. He's absolutely fascinated by Muggle creations, and I'm sure he'd be thrilled at the idea of Muggle soap.
Okay, Hermione Granger wants 4 bars of soap. I've never done custom orders before, but of course exceptions can be made. I better plan something good. Hermione Granger is a clever witch whose favorite pastime is reading, so I want to make 4 different books made out of soap. The bar will essentially be the bulk of the book, so I'll do a pot swirl of 2 different shades of pale yellow to simulate aged paper, and then I'll use a fork on top to give the impression of those ridges that some old books have. Once the soap is cured and cut, I'll make 4 different shades of soap dough, 1 for each Hogwarts house, and create the covers of the books using those. Lastly, I'll use some metallic finishes to inscribe the books with their titles. This is a pretty big soap project, so let's get started on the soap. I need to prepare a lot of colors. Starting with the soap dough colors, the yellow will get dark yellow mica from Windy Point, a 1/4 teaspoon of that. For blue, I'm using this gorgeous brilliant blue mica from Voyageur, a 1/4 teaspoon as well. Green is going to be a mix of jungle green mica from Voyageur, about an 1/8 teaspoon of that, as well as margarita mica from Voyageur, just to bring it up a bit, an 1/8 teaspoon of that as well. The red book will get crimson heart mica from Voyageur, which is a really lovely, sparkly, warm red. I'll use a 1/4 teaspoon of that, and just to dull those colors a bit, I'm going to add a tiddly bit of onyx mica from Voyageur to the red and blue, and a bit tiddly of brown oxide to the yellow and green because I feel brown darkens those colors better than the black. For the actual soap, I'm just measuring out 2 different quantities of titanium dioxide. 1/2 of the soap will get 1/2 teaspoon and the other half will get 2 teaspoons. Lastly, for the little secret addition to the design, I'm going to use Coho Shimmer Mica from Voyageur, which is a stunning poppy red color. I bathe each of those micas in a little drizzle of my oil blend, and then I give those a taste of the swirly twirly frother device until the colors are nice and uniform. I set my whites aside, and I'm going to put my soap dough colors onto a plate for easy transport because I need to easily pop them into storage later. I pour my Skin Edie liquid into my Skin Slimy liquid, formula down in the description below, and I blend just until emulsified, which takes only about 10 seconds or so with my 1/4 batch. For my fragrance blend, I had to create something that Hermione would enjoy. Her basic personality trait is bookworm, so I wanted to create something that would emulate a relaxing afternoon in an old library being lost in a book. I chose leather and swede? It's a complex, rich aroma that is, yes, leathery, with waves of sandalwood and a hint of vanilla. I went for leather because parchment is made of animal hide, and I thought leather might bring out that vibe. I'm pretty indifferent to how leather smells normally, but this is surprisingly warm and comforting. I could imagine myself smoking a pipe in a fancy study with my monocle. 15 grams. Speaking of pipe smoke, my next fragrance is tobacco leaves. If any of you smoke or chew tobacco, Is it supposed to smell good? Because this fragrance also surprised me. It's very leather adjacent, like it's definitely in the same family of warmth and coziness, and it pairs really well with leather and sweat. 15 grams of that. And the last ingredient in my fragrance potion is lemongrass verbena. Because when Hermione smells the Amortentia love potion, she reveals her favorite scents to be freshly mown grass and parchment. Just a splash, 5 grams. Something I realized a few days after making the soap is that the fragrance blend I made actually smells extremely similar to Axe's Apollo line. Although my blend is stronger, so I'm just gonna say Apollo is actually a dupe of the Granger line. Now, here comes another oops. Because what I planned to do was separate my batter into my soap dough colors first before adding the fragrance, because fragrance is highly unpredictable, and these ones in particular contain a lot of vanillin, so they'll discolor brown over time. But I didn't. So my soap dough will be similarly unpredictable and discolored. Great. I added what initially started as a predetermined amount of soap batter into each of those soap dough colors, but as my batter thickened quickly, it became more and more challenging to measure properly. This part is a bit of a mess and would not pass in a professional setting, but I am not a professional, and thank Pop-Tarts for that. I blend those up as fast as I can, and that green does not look good. And then I set those colors aside. Moving on to the actual meat of the soap, I split the batter in half about as ceremoniously as one could, and add their pre-measured and pre-spilled titanium dioxide paints. I know these soaps are going to discolor over time, but that's totally okay. I just wanted to retain a lot of that off-white, aged paper look that uncolored soap batter tends to have, so I'm using titanium dioxide as an inker to help retain some of that color when the vanillin inevitably discolors the soap tan. I want to go full beige mauve for my interior design, so I'm dumping the two papery colors together. I'm giving it a little mix with my spatula just to help those two shades mingle a bit, and then it's ready to pour. I'm not sure why it came out so chunky. I'm guessing maybe one of those fragrances riced a bit, but I did not notice this while the offense was being committed. I also refrained from pouring all the way to the top because I want my book shapes to be a bit more traditional and rectangular. I give the soap a little shaky earthquakey, and then texture the top using the prongs of a fork. Now listen, I'm not aiming for ultra realism because that's ultra unrealistic for the work of my caliber, so I just want to suggest the structure of the edges of the paper the way they would appear in a book that's a few hundred years old. At last, this series is going to spend 24 hours in the closet to Spotify, and then it'll be ready to be cut and bound. Meanwhile, I've wrapped the soap dough colors in plastic wrap so that they can saponify without losing any of their moisture. 24 hours later, the books are ready to be cut. The entire top ashed and turned like oatmeal mush color, but I'm actually grateful for that because I peeked at the rest of the soap and it wasn't looking too hot. But that's okay, because it's gonna get covered up in the end.
Well, that's a philosophy for life, isn't it? If it's really ugly, just cover it up and hope people don't see it. Definitely don't embrace it or anything.
Hello, my name is Sarcasm. So, it's a really good thing I'm covering these up with soap dough because these bars are ugly. I'm guessing those orange chunks were caused by one of the ricing fragrances, and I could see the soap rebranded as like Orange Yogurt Parfait. But since these soaps are being made for Hermione Granger, I've gotta bind them. I'm checking on my soap dough after a day just to see how it's doing. For all of you wondering, soap dough is just your standard cold process soap that hasn't dried out. When you're making bars of soap, you want them to lose water so they become nice and hard and last a long time. But by covering the soap in plastic wrap, we prevent it from drying out, so it keeps its clay-like consistency. It won't stay this way forever though, it'll usually be workable for a few weeks before it becomes too firm to work with. It is safe to handle with your bare hands after you've let the soap saponify completely, so at least 24 hours. I've got my gloves on because I suspect the dough will be a little too sticky. And yeah, it's still very sticky. So I'm gonna leave them in the closet for another day or two, and I'll leave a tiny gap in the plastic wrap just so the dough can dry out a little bit faster. So I was impatient, and I mixed the dough with a little cornstarch just so it was no longer tacky. I drew up some designs for the covers of Hermione's books, and I'll be using this as a guide when I shape my dough. Something I also didn't mention is I also kept my bars airtight to preserve the moisture, just like I did with my soap dough. I did this because I felt like the soap dough would probably adhere better to the bars if they were a similar sort of consistency. My plan is to make all of the 3D elements of the book covers in this plain white dough, and then drape a thin layer of colored dough over top. Starting with the spines, I was inspired by those tomes you always see in like fantasy things. They tend to have spines with those exaggerated like ridges, I guess you could say. So I've rolled 4 little balls of dough into tiny sausages, and I'm placing them where I think they'll look appropriate. Before the final placement, I give the bar a spritzing of rubbing alcohol to help the clay adhere better. With that 15 minutes out of the way, it's time to spend thrice as long rolling and cutting out all the little details. For the corners of my red book, which will be a replica of the standard book of spells, I've cut a little piece of cardstock to use as a stencil to cut around. And that's all there is to making the impressions. I've just got to repeat that process a few more times for the remaining books. At this point, I was just trusting the process, and when it comes to my hobbies, I have trust issues. Id est, I cannot trust myself to make something good. I take my success medium rare, thank you very much. But in the end, I think it all pays off, and this ends up being one of my favorite projects to have worked on. Now, this is still a work in progress, but I actually really like the way they're turning out. Could they be a bit cleaner? Yes, but I'm just fine settling with just fine. Starting again with the standard book of spells, I'm going to roll out my red leather as thin as I can get it because I did not give myself a ton of dough to work with. Using the book as a guide, I trim off the edges with a ruler so they're nice and straight. Give the leather a nice spritzing of rubbing alcohol, and then roll up the book. I press the dough a little bit around those 3D elements and trim off all the ugly bits, touch it up a little bit here and there, and here we go. We've got our very first book bound and ready to be titled. 3 more to go. So that little ton sticking out of the book there was actually where I implemented that secret red dough, which was meant to be one of those silk bookmarks. It looked kinda dumb and it wasn't staying put, so I abandoned that idea pretty quickly. I didn't intend to make a 5th book, but I thought, hey, I have all this leftover dough and I've got a pretty thick soap sample, so let's make another book. I imagine this being Hermione's journal or something. Just a mishmash of all of the Hogwarts houses and their secrets unified together in this little journal. I love this book, not gonna lie, it might be my favorite one. With all the books bound and draped with their leathery covers, they're ready to be painted and titled. Popping open some carbon black pigment, which is literally just a black hole on your screen, and some brown oxide, I'm going to dry brush the covers just to add some shadow and to weather them a bit. I'll use brown for the warm toned covers and carbon black for the others. I'm very lightly tickling the edges of the book with my brush, as well as those little indents along the spine where some dirt might collect. I do the same for the red, then the green, and finally the blue. Next, I want to paint the accents in gold and silver. I mix up some gold paint using some super gold from TMP and some vodka. This metallic dust is the same stuff I used to paint the Master Sword soap in my previous video. If you're a Zelda fan, that video's for you. Now, disclaimer, these metallics are not mica. I asked the manufacturers what they're made of, and they said since they're not listed as a food ingredient, their makeup is proprietary. So these are just products I really only want to reserve for realism or for decorative purposes. And how couldn't I? Look at how beautiful that gold applies, and seen against that red, it looks so amazing and reflective, and why am I so excited about soap? Since we're so close to the finish line and you've watched this far, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel if you've enjoyed this content and found me a hair entertaining. Go ahead and share it with anybody who likes Harry Potter. I would very much like that. At last, Hermione's little library is complete. Let's go through them one by one, shall we? First up, we have standard book of spells and lopsided writing. It's difficult to write on soap, okay? And then on the back we have that nice little star wand thing, which could also be a giraffe. As a real-life wizard with practical spellcasting knowledge, this is one of my favorite books to read. Second, we have Muggles Who Notice. This book is very used. It's a bit generic, but I love the blue and the silver together. If Hermione's gonna give one of these books to Arthur Weasley, this would be the one. Third is the Book of Ancient Runes, which Hermione was fond of studying. I chose the Ensus and Othala runes for the cover because I thought they looked the most interesting, just like the people who get a Chinese character tattooed on themselves and it means like, worm. Up next is A Hogwarts History, written so because Hogwarts A History didn't fit properly. This is one of Hermione's favorite books and contains details about the Chamber of Secrets, my favorite legend to come from the wizarding world. Lastly, we have Hermione's journal. I love the way the colors worked out for this one, and those golden pages really bring me back to when I had 12 journals in my closet and only filled a couple pages across all of them. These magical books were the largest soap project I've ever worked on, and despite the hurdles I had to leap along the way, it was one of the funnest projects I've done. I've always wanted to play around with soap dough, and I think this was the perfect project to implement it. After a couple days exposed to the air, it hardens just like real soap, and I haven't had any problems with separation. Now, is this the cleanest project I've done? Well, that's a hard question to answer, because my work is never clean. On one hand, if I were to do this project again in the future, I would try to be a bit more precise with my edges, I'd try to prevent any wrinkles in the clay, and I'd do a far better paint job, especially when it comes to those titles. On the other hand, I kind of dig that rustic homemade feel where not everything is perfect, not everything is straight, not everything is aligned correctly. I feel like it adds to that sense of whimsy that the wizarding world literally feeds off of. I was gonna call this collection something like the Hogwarts Library, but the name Hogwarts is protected by copyright, so I instead decided to call it Compendium Magica. Latin is the primary language of spellcasting, and this collection of books is, after all, a magical compendium. I do have a client to send these off to, so sit back and relax while I prepare Hermione's package. cast a simple spell on the parcel to protect it from the elements, Protegio Monasculum, and my cat Orion tests it. Finally, I place the parcel in the fireplace where Hermione's owl flew in. Owls are smart. It'll know the soap is ready.